Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spirit Coffee Talk. Myself, Lisa Richmond, and my two besties, Elise and Jeanette, meet every Friday for coffee and a chat about spirit and what's going on. And we always have kind of a pre-recording talk connection and then just kind of seeing what's happening in the energies. And, it's same, but different. Like last week when we kind of talked about just rolling with things and not having such um high almost like expectations on yourself to be a certain way in the new year. But this is also like the whole concept of like that expectation hangover, right? Where one of my mentors, Christine Hassler, uses that term, expectation hangover. And it's really beautiful because sometimes, especially in the spiritual community, and when you have your own personal spiritual practice, whether it's, tuning in or speaking to an intuitive or pulling cards or whatever it might be, sometimes we form a story in our mind's eye and we get really attached to it, attached to a certain way of being or the way in which things are going to play out. And we look for validations with astrologers or, in that spiritual community. And we can really feel the hit of somewhat of an expectation hangover when things don't play out necessarily exactly how you want them to. And so we wanted to just kind of touch on that today on the fact that in life and in your spiritual practice, we can really come up against some of these really big expectations that we have that it's almost like this, like it's going to save the day. It's that savior thing, right? Especially in the spiritual community. And at the end of the day, I hate to say this, they're not going to like this. But I say we are the creators of our own reality, but really like that can that can be kind of a pro and a con in this situation of like when we're really putting it out there and expecting these really great things to happen because we've seen it or like we had an intuitive see it or something like that. And all of a sudden it doesn't play out exactly how it is, but how you create the reality and how you perceive what's right in front of you and what might be your greatest gift that's right in front of you. And you don't see it because you have this level of expectation that it's supposed to be a certain way. When spirit doesn't do that, it's like most times it's not what you expect anyway, right? I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but
Mhm.
I know that there's a lot of that right now because it's kind of like looking for that like savior or that the answer so that we can feel more comfortable, right? And spirit's always there for you. Your guides are always there for you. Always. You're never alone in it. But expectation can really get you in the spiritual world as well. Do you guys have anything to kind of add to that?
Mhm.
Someone
Elise,
that
go
I
for it.
know, well, you go, but someone that I know says expectation is a pregnant resentment. And it makes me laugh because I'm like, A, it's kind of funny, but B, not wrong, because we're holding it. And then eventually, when things don't happen the way we want it to, it turns into,
A
this
little baby
resentment,
resentment that
a
grows
little
into a
baby
big
resentment.
resentment.
Yeah. And then it's in a big angry
That's
resentment.
true. It's hard to get over resentment too, right? Like once resentment kicks in, that's a hard one to release and get over for sure.
Hmm.
Um, I was reflecting, Lisa, when you were talking on the best lesson I ever learned about expectations, and it reminded me of the Garth Brooks song. I think it's Unanswered Prayers. I think everybody knows that song. Um, I remember when I was like 18, 19. Growing up, even up until that point, all I wanted was to make it in the music industry. I wanted to sing, I wanted to perform, yada, yada. And I hoped and I prayed and all of the things that I would now call setting intentions and manifestation and all of that. And it didn't happen to the degree that I wanted it, although I got to do some really cool things, but like it
Yeah,
didn't
you
make it
did.
big, right? However, there have been at least two different times in my life since then, so maybe like 30s and 40s, where I was so grateful that I didn't make it. So grateful. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful. One of them being the state of the music industry. And yes, I'm generalizing. So, I mean, to those that are doing well, fantastic. I'm totally generalizing this statement. But the
That's
state
the
of the
first thing
music,
I thought of too.
yeah, the state of it is horrible, horrible. And the way that people have to work and to try and get to where they are is just ridiculous. It just strips a person bare, strips a soul. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I would never have wanted to be involved in that. And I am so glad. I'm so glad I got rejected by the different people that I did at different times so that I didn't make it. But at the time when I wanted it for so many years, I was so frustrated because I had this expectation. But then on the
Mm-hmm.
flip side, I'm like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you for not having that happen. Or even thanking myself for the moment I decided when I was in the industry that I didn't want it anymore. I just knew I didn't want it anymore. And then it opened up my whole world to all of this and having my kids. Anyways, long story short,
Yeah, your kids too, right?
my
Because
kids.
your
Yeah.
music career was pre-Easton, wasn't it?
I would have had to sign a deal that I wouldn't get pregnant until after 30 something. Like I would have been contracted to not be able to bring a child in when I felt it was timely based on the music industry. And I can understand if I'm looking at it in numbers and stats and all this, sure, fair, it's controllable. But when I look at the soul's journey, heck no. Right? So like when I ponder those things every time now, when I come to an expectation, only based on my experience with that, because those were really big things, I'm like, okay, I'm holding on to this smidgen of hope that there is a bigger purpose for me and why it's not coming to fruition yet, why this isn't coming together yet. And I reflect on those moments because of that. Um, but it doesn't mean it's easy because when I go back into
Yeah.
those moments before I understood why, in retrospect, right, it was so frustrating because the
Oh gosh, it's
expectation
always
was
retrospective,
it
that you
always
reflect back.
retrospect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think until you have a very vivid experience that then you can draw on, it's full on retrospect,
Yeah.
which is hard. That's a hard
It
thing.
really is. It
Yeah.
is because too, like as an advisor, spiritual advisor, friend, you can say, oh, it's pretty like loud and clear how this isn't in your greatest good. Like this is happening for you and like to kind of trust how things are unfolding because it seems pretty obvious that this isn't like in your greatest good right now. Right? But you don't want to hear that when you're like, yes, it is. It is in my greatest good and I want it right now. It's really hard to trust. But
Hmm.
like I would really encourage the majority of people watching right now to reflect back in their life and really look at the times when that became evident, right? Where
Hmm.
you can truly reflect back and be like, oh, yeah, I can see either what I learned there, what the lesson was, when I met somebody that was really significant in my life or something, and the rest of it was like garbage, but like that's where that person showed up or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? There is a greater divine guidance that they're showing me this golden light
Hmm.
pathway that's like kind of the follow the yellow brick road thing, but you don't know what the heck is on your path, and when you come face to face you know with something that might not seem exactly how you anticipated it, it's not for naught.
Yep. I agree.
But expectations can be real tough.
It is a tough thing. Here's the other thing too. I, how do I explain this? I think we're taught to expect.
I do too.
Like
It
we're
comes from our
taught,
need for certainty. We want
yeah,
to see what's going on. We want to see so that we can feel somewhat safe in our bodies or safe in our journey because we
yeah,
have this false sense of knowing that something's around the corner that's going to be great, right? Because it's the sense of like that need for certainty.
yeah. And
But
even more so
really,
though, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go.
Um, Even more so, I think we're taught there's two lanes here. There's one of like spiritual flow where like things have to flow in right timing and alignment and such. But then we're also taught in the more linear way to set the expectations, set the goals, make your plan, make it happen, and achieve it, right? The end goal is achieve it. And if you don't, then you failed. Try again. And then we don't realize that there's two separate parts to it, right? We apply that principle to the flow-based energy of the universe, and that doesn't fit. We can't tell the universe, act now, because I say so. We have to co-create with it, which is the hard part. We're not the sole creator, we're the co-creator with an energy. And so I think under all the layers, we're trying to apply the linear nature to one thing to some of our expectations of others that are based on flow.
Totally.
Yeah.
And free
And
will
a
comes
lot of
into
old
this.
programming.
Yeah, old programming and definitely free will. And I also think timing, because I'll stop talking right away. But last thing they're showing me is they're showing me even like consider when someone's going through puberty, like a 9-year-old could say, I just want to go through puberty so I'm big and I have muscles and I whatever. But they can't force the speed of that. Like it has to happen. And like there's a progression to it too. So like sometimes the spiritual journey that we're on has a progression that we cannot jump to
Yep.
big muscly 17-year-old from the
Yeah.
8-year-old. We
Yeah.
have to progress through. And
Yeah.
it's in that I think we're not taught enough about the grace needed there. We're only taught about the goal setting.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I
Set
think that's a
goals.
lack.
Yeah. Get
Yeah.
to that desired outcome,
Hmm.
not about the journey getting there. So
Yes.
true. So true.
And then you're right, Elise. Free will is another piece that comes and weaves itself all throughout all of that.
Yeah, they're I had to like write things down because they were coming in all over the place. Um, so there's this piece of people often in readings will say like, well, has this person missed me or has this thing missed me? And spirit time and time and time again, and usually they'll have to remind me of this too, because I'm like, when you get that resentment or that frustration when things don't play out, that we have the blueprint, right? The yellow brick road, right? That we've decided there's things, experiences that we're meant to have in this life. We also have free will. We also are at, quote unquote, the mercy of other people's free will. And that spirit says time and time again, if things shift and change based on free will, based on collective, based on whatever, that we are always in the background reorganizing and rerouting your yellow brick road to support you in the highest outcome based on what you desire, based on what you've agreed to and chosen and prior to coming into this life, based on what other people have agreed to, and that there's no missing. You never miss the boat. It might be delayed, it might change, it might come sooner, it might, whatever, but we're always in the background. Okay, this person made this choice and this person made this choice. And okay, how can we have this intersect and how can we da 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 da? And that it doesn't mean that everything will happen exactly as we think it will, but that the intention behind the experience, the desire that you have, like you were saying, Jeanette, last week with how do you want to feel? I would question, or not question, but guess that the desires that you had around your music career are very similar to the desires you have in your life now and your purpose. And it's just a different manifestation of what you were calling in based on who your soul was meant to be in this life. And so our all of that is always just working in the background, trying to support us in the best outcome. But in the midst of it, when we have these expectations, that starts to influence our choices. It starts to maybe slow us down a little bit because we're like, and I'll admit, I'll get frustrated. And I'm like, cards, spirit, whatever, I don't care, but that's fine because I'll need to take a break from it. Maybe there's other reasons why I feel that way and I'm exhausted, like we were talking about last week, and I just don't have that energetic reserve in me right now. So I'd have to step away and I take a break and then I can come back to it with a renewed energy and be like, oh, okay, maybe here's how my choices were influencing the outcome of things. Maybe it's things that I won't ever understand or know why it didn't play out in a certain way, but it did. And I can feel more grounded in that. But they were also really bringing up this idea that, how do I want to say this? That we also don't doubt what you know. And for me, there's been real challenging or conflicting times where I've been like, I feel this XYZ thing deeply in my soul. Like you could not give me $1 million to convince me otherwise. And even in moments of like, screw it, I'm over this and I'm frustrated and I have resentment, I still can't fully convince myself that it's
Mm-hmm.
not true or that it's not real. And there's this balance of trusting what you know, but releasing the way in which it plays out. So it's not to say abandon that which you know, or that you feel deeply, or that you feel is meant for you, or that, an experience is going to happen, or some awareness. I find that really with health, this awareness of like, I know my body very well. And people can have all sorts of opinions about this and that, but I'm not going to deny what I experience. I might have to have an openness to how it's going to play out or the timing of things, but I don't have to let go of the deep connection and awareness that I have of what feels right or wrong for me. Mm-hmm. So finding that balance point, because at the end, what they were saying is that all of this, whether it's about the choices, whether it's about not abandoning your knowings, whether it's about things like that resentment. Oh, sorry, this was the other thing, is we start to get resentful with our guides too, because we expect them to show up in a certain way. And we feel like for me, they've been very quiet over the holidays and into the new year. They haven't been saying a whole lot, little snippets here and there. Mm-hmm. For other people, it's all good. But in my world, they're like, nah, you're good. We'll throw you a few little bones here and there, but like, just be. But with all of those areas for potential resentment, because we hold expectation, it comes back to like, how can I just be present? How can I hold my truth and trust what I know, and trust that I don't even necessarily want to use the word trust, because sometimes that feels really hard in that moment. But how can I just honor that, like, this is what I feel right now? My world, my guides, my experience right now might not mimic that, but I'm not going to deny what I know. And I'm just going to be present. And we were speaking about this before. There's like a neutrality in that, where you're just kind of like, okay, well, right now I'm just going to like I'm just going to be rooted here, and I'm going to do my life and ask myself how I want to feel and follow that nudge until I can shift out of this place where expectation or resentment isn't pulling me too much in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. That's a practice in itself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
So
and I'm pondering too, because I totally agree with this idea. And I wonder, this must be all a part of breaking out of boxes, right? Because when you live in a box mentality, I'll just say, for example, and the rest of the collective lives in that box mentality, it's a known reality with known principles reinforced by those around you that are thinking, feeling the same or similar. But we're in a massive transformative time where we've been like breaking down these boxes and realizing that actually nobody lives in a box, and everybody's perspective of the reality is very different. And so in one way it can feel very lonely, but then we could also look at it as like all the shades of all the different kinds of colors, which creates this beautiful rainbow, but no one is the same. And so I think when we don't have those external pieces to reinforce what we know, the way in which we used to, or the way in which we did when we grew up, in some ways, that can also be really unnerving. Because then when spirit is kind of quiet, or, we're waiting for that expectation to come, we don't have the same support system in the same way that we grew up having, if that makes sense. And again, I'm trying to generalize, but like with spiritual awakening or ascension, you are so thrown off the standard path that you have to get to this point to rely on self in such a way. But the discovery of doing that, I think, is a constant journey for one, but it is not linear and it's not comfortable. And it blows the idea of expectation out of the water. The only expectation, I guess, is to trust in self, right? Which is the hardest thing. So I think we're in just this spirit saying conundrum, but we're in this really interesting phase right now of utter transformation at the very, very base of who and what we are. We can't see all of what we're becoming yet. And if we
Think
could,
we
there's,
ever will? Or do you
well,
think it's just snippets, like again, retrospective
yeah,
reflection on a certain time period?
I think it depends on the person.
I
And
think
I think it
so.
depends on the phase of life because I know I've talked to some people who are just in the last couple of years have been in this solid phase of just flow and trust and surrender. And they're
Hmm.
literally living that way.
Hmm.
And then there's other people that are bouncing off the bottom, and then there's people that are all in between. Like I think yes. Do we know when and for sure how? I have no idea. Do we reach it in this lifetime? I don't know. Like that's where it comes to everybody's living their own individual color.
Yeah.
And that's the part that makes it hard.
Mhm.
And I know this is getting like way expanded, but I don't know. I think it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah.
We wa
Where it feels like it answers so much, yet creates so many more questions. You know?
Always.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. And there is no certainty. I think that's another thing. It's like there's no certainty other than death. I hate to sound morbid, but it's true. There's no
Mhm.
certainty because of free will,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
because other people have contracts too. And so it's almost like trust, right? But that is such a tough word. Like if
Mhm.
somebody keeps giving me the word trust, I know it's true. Maybe that's why it's so triggering
Yeah, like, ugh.
because I know it's true, but it leaves me still with that sense of uncertainty, right?
Mhm.
And I think that for certain times in people's lives as well, like sometimes it's easier to be uncertain and trust. And then
Mhm.
other times it's like, you know what? It would really make me feel a lot more safe if I could just be certain about something.
Mhm.
Right. And then there's that expectation again because we start looking for the answer. We start searching for that reassurance. And I mean, no matter where you look, you can seek and find any validation of anything really that you're looking for. But does that add more expectation and then therefore more disappointment? Or like, you know what I mean? It's kind of this circle. It's just a cycle.
Mhm.
I just see this like record player
Mhm.
hitting the same note over, don't, don't, over and over and over. And maybe that's the cycle we're in right now. Maybe that's the part of, evolution in which we're experiencing in humanity is that kind of Groundhog Day and feeling like within that, how can we create the reality in which makes us feel safe in a world that is uncertain? Does that
Mhm.
make sense? Or is that
Mhm.
just another layer of the
No,
I
it
think
makes
it all
sense.
is layers though too. Like it
Yeah.
makes sense and it's such a layered topic. Like it just I feel like it forever will go in circles because cycles are life, like existence. There are just always cycles to some degree, depending on
Hmm.
what you're
Mhm.
talking about. Those will change, but they're ever present, and they're bringing me back to this like finding the center point of the cycle, which to your point, Lisa, is very much a practice. One of my words, like I was saying last week, I didn't really do much in the way of like goals or I want to do this or that this year, but I always like a word at the beginning of the calendar year. And then now I'm shifting more into like spring as like that action, like potential energy. So I'm Libra, so I can never make one choice about anything ever. So I have two words, but one of my words, and it kept coming up, and I had to sit with like, why do I want this word? Because it kind of irritated me a little bit, from the feeling of like having some expectations and feeling a little frustrated and having a really a challenging year. And as I preach about all the time, like honoring your experiences and allowing yourself to process and not bypassing with spirituality. But the word that kept coming up was sacred, and I was like, what does that mean? And it was like finding the sacredness in anything and everything. So when the expectations aren't being met and I'm frustrated and I have resentment, or it feels like the sky is falling, or things are in flow, or I feel like I'm floating in the middle, it's finding the sacredness in that. When I'm in the middle, it's like, oh, it's sunny today. That feels really nice. Or, oh, it's, I have extra time to rest. Or, I have a little bit of time in the morning to sit with my dogs. Or it can be the like simplest, most mundane things. In the challenge, it can be, okay, there's sacredness in suffering. There is.
Mhm.
And I felt that in grief, and I felt that in, health challenges, and certain experiences that I had in the last year that were so hard in the moment that I felt like, oh my gosh, like when am I going to crawl out of this hole? I do now see that, okay, they brought up big pieces of awareness for me that I needed to shift through and that I'm still shifting through. And so holding on to that hindsight of, okay, I know there is some sacredness in suffering. It doesn't make it easy, but there is some sacredness in it. And
Mhm.
then when things are flowing, rather than waiting for the shoe to drop, or fear, allowing myself to feel, okay, there's sacredness in the flow of life. And when spirit's really
Mhm.
loud and things are coming up, I'm like, yes, like always just trying to orient towards where can I find sacred in this
Mhm.
moment, which for me feels like that center point of the cycle. And that is going to be a real process because it is not always the default setting. It's easy to find that when things are going well. It can be hard to
Mhm.
find that when it's
That's
not
right.
going well.
Yeah.
100%. That's such a
It's
good
like
point.
I get the vision of like me treading water in the middle of the ocean, literally going down and you being like, find the sacredness of this moment. Like,
There's a whale. There's a
I
whale under you. Let the whale. No sharks, only
Oh,
whales.
totally.
Let the salt water make you float.
Yep.
At
Yep.
least it's sunny. It's not, you're not spending
know.
nighttime in the ocean terrified. Look
At least
Yes.
it's daytime.
at that sun.
You know what, though? I have to say, the more you do that, though, the more it actually becomes a thing.
Mhm.
And I have to say, because I used to be really good, like when I was younger, I was really good at being negative. It really was. I'm Gemini, okay? Feisty Gemini. And I could see the negative to anything when I was little. Well, that sounds really dark, but like I was a good pouter when I was little. Let me put it that way.
Mhm.
Okay. So I could find the pout in anything. The more I've practiced finding a silver lining in any situation, the more I've been able to do what you're saying, Elise, and like make something sacred. And even like when I was really sick this summer and I was in the hospital one of the 800th times and I felt so awful, I remember I was like, okay, at least I'm not in labor. Labor was way worse. So technically, this is way better. Would I rather be in labor? Not at all. Would I rather have this? I would. So here I am. Okay, saving grace. And I find the more that I can do that in situations, the more I can, maybe it is finding that center point or finding the surfboard to ride the waves so I'm not being pummeled, right? Or treading water. Like it's almost become a challenge of mine to always try and find that to a fault in a sense. But it helps to change that perspective. I don't always do it. I can't always do it. Sometimes I have to be really feisty and frustrated for a little bit. But
Of course.
there's
There's
something so
sacredness
sacred
in the
to it.
fight too. There's
Yeah.
sacredness in the fight. There's sacredness, like we talked last week about
Yeah, and the
turning towards the
authenticity.
numbing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I agree, it can be the positivity, or not positivity, but like finding that silver lining. But there can be sacred in anger. There can be
Mhm.
like, so it's I think finding that sacred point, or how, whatever word, because it's semantics, right? Whatever can help you turn towards what's going to support you through the thing is the sacredness. If that's like
Mhm.
zoning out for a week and watching a show that you love, then like, cool, great. If that's reframing your experience in that moment, do that. If it's, just finding something that'll bring you joy in that moment and take you out of thinking about any of the situation, do that. Like it can be anything that just helps you orient towards what's going to support you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree. It's a conscious effort, though. It's not
Yeah.
easy. Like it takes a pause, right? We talk a lot about like taking that pause for a
Mhm.
moment before you act. It takes the pause, and sometimes it takes like 20 pauses,
Mhm.
and 20 reframes. But I think that's how we start to create that different reality that we live in, that different perspective, because it's so easy to be pulled into the negative, dense realities because it's everywhere. It's
Mhm.
everywhere. It's in different interactions we have with people and their opinions. And not that their opinions are wrong. It's just sometimes their opinions are very bold and strong and I don't know, invasive. But we
Mhm.
can choose the reality of how we perceive it. And I don't know, maybe that's where I don't even know what I would call it, like eternal optimist or something. But I think maybe it's because of that challenge of finding the silver lining in any situation from having been in some really shitty situations.
Mhm.
Hmm.
You know,
And
like it's the
and
only thing
knowing that,
left.
yeah, and
Mhm.
knowing that somebody's opinion or somebody's um experience or whatever can be super valid in the frequency in which they're resonating at that moment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't resonate, then that's okay, but it doesn't make it any less real for them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And I think the more that
exactly.
we can really kind of like have that sovereignty in it within ourselves and like hold whatever frequency we're in, then it's way less about the duality and it's way
Mhm.
less about the crushing waves that we're just like riding our frequency in whichever way it is. And then whatever shows up is in accordance to that, no good or bad. It's
Just is.
just
Mhm.
is,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
sometimes that can take like that can take some of the load off of having to like have that validation or proving that to somebody or even like trying to see the light in a situation, be like, this is a frequency and when I'm at, and I have the ability to go here or here in whichever way I go with my thoughts, my feelings, my reactions, my interactions based on my experiences and my perception right now, right? And
Mhm.
then that actually gives you so much of your power in any way.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then what you do with that is up to you.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree. It's a
Yeah.
great way to put it. How it
Yeah,
takes the
because
duality away
yeah,
Mhm.
totally. And
or
I think
lessens
that's
it.
where we're at right now though. Like truthfully, it's like we are continually being given the opportunity of choice in a world in a collective frequency, a collective energy of shift and like oh, they're just showing me like during this shift, it's really important to actually go in and ask yourself, just because I'm seeing this play out on TV, on my feed, in this conversation, is it my reality? Because you can choose what frequency you want to enter within that. You can enter fear, you can enter love, you can enter absolute neutrality. You can enter into duality or oneness. It is ultimately your gift of choice. You really do have the gift of choice. In saying that, there are situations, people, places that are really freaking good at trying to create your feeling, trying
Mhm.
Mhm.
to instill fear, happiness, belief system, whatever. That is literally like their professional job
The
to
propaganda
create that.
machine.
Yeah,
Mhm.
man, like
Yeah.
big time. And so really remember that going back here, not looking outside to see what the reality is, but actually going in and knowing that you have that sovereignty, you have that choice, and there's no expectations on that choice to be good or bad, high or low,
Mhm.
none of that BS. Right? Again, propaganda. You do have the ability in your humanness to create whatever frequency, thought, vibration that you want based
Mhm.
on your experiences, all of that. So when you actually decide, like, yeah, all of this might be true in which I'm watching right now. And, but like in this moment, what is my sovereign choice in this? And if it is to chill or to be scared or to cry or yell or scream, then that is your absolute sovereign choice.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
agree.
love that.
You know, and that's why Spirit said this year, like 2025, is big about empowerment or agitation you choose,
Yeah.
right? Like with the
Mhm.
planetary alignments this year, it's going to either empower you or it's going to agitate you. It's completely your choice,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I think if we
And
can
it
hold
probably
tight to
will do
that,
both.
Absolutely, it will.
Yeah.
There's
Mhm.
no way we can just be like, I choose empowerment. It's just only going to do that. Like you might be able to get to that in each situation, but it'll probably come through the agitation and
Yeah.
then choosing to bring it into empowerment.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's this idea of like our co-creative ability. Like we need to realize our perspective creates our reality and we choose it
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
every moment.
every moment,
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
moment. Yeah.
And that's why one of the reasons I perpetually harp on like feel the feeling and then shift towards what you want. And Jeanette, I feel like I kind of bypassed one of your points, which wasn't my intention, around
Hmm.
how you trained yourself to see more of the positive. There's a really cool book called The Happiness Advantage by Sean
Uh,
Anker. And
yeah, I was given that book
oh
actually.
really?
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Um, there's lots of great information in it, but there's one specific study that always jumps out to me, that they did at Harvard where they had people play. So it speaks to the idea of like, we can train our brain to see the good. So I'm always the person that's going to say, never avoid feeling the hard, bad, whatever, the tough things, because you can grow and learn and move through them. And it makes it a lot easier to turn towards the things that you desire and the positive. And that is, in my opinion, a way to not bypass and just
Hmm.
like jump to like everything's fine. But by moving and feeling things, you can shift towards that with a lot more ease. And there's a practice in training your brain to see more of those things. And so this Harvard, I believe it was Harvard, where they had people play Tetris for like hours and hours and hours a day.
The
And
Tetris
then,
effect.
yeah, and then they started, so then they would, what they were reporting is that they would, when they were walking downtown, I think it was in New York or somewhere, Harvard's not in New York, they could see the buildings as Tetris pieces. So their world around them, their brains started interpreting their world as a Tetris game. And they would notice like, oh, this piece could fit here and that could fit there. And their brain was just oriented because it had been rewired and trained towards see the world as a Tetris game. And
mm,
orient towards that. And so that's
Yeah.
exactly what you were saying, Jeanette, is like train yourself. That's why people talk. One of the reasons why people speak to gratitude practices so much, because the more you train your brain
totally.
to look for the things that you want it to, it will by default start to orient towards that naturally.
Hmm.
And so it won't feel so bypassy. So it's a both and, right? You were speaking to duality, Lisa. It's like
Hmm.
hold space for the things that are hard, the agitation and whatever comes with that. Be practicing some of that orienting and training your brain towards what you desire it to focus on more. When those agitation pieces come up, you move with them in whatever way, and then you shift towards empowerment and creating what it is that you want.
Mhm.
Feel like this was like 3 episodes in one.
It
I know.
was.
I keep looking at the clock like,
Seriously.
how long have we been talking?
Yeah, I
Not
know.
that
So
long, but
anybody who's still here, I really encourage you to like go back and be like, okay, section 1, 2, and 3, because we really touched on so much information.
yeah.
And like for myself too, I can't wait to watch it back and have it speak to me in so many different ways because there's so many different messages that's in here, but they're so, so beneficial for right now or whenever you're watching it, whenever this comes up, whenever you're needing to see this. I think it's got a lot of really important messages in it for people. So in saying that, I think it's time to wrap it up. But any last messages?
No,
Mhm.
I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, so many messages. I have absolutely no idea what you're gonna name it, Elise. I don't know what you're gonna title this
I know.
bad
I'm
boy.
like, shit, I
But
gotta
there's a
rewatch
lot of
this.
like great tidbits in here. So
Yeah.
thank you for this amazing conversation, ladies. And I think it's really beneficial. And I think a lot of people, myself included, can look back at this in times of need when we're really needing that self-empowerment to know that sometimes it doesn't feel like we have the power within us to create, but we do. And even that term sometimes can be really triggering. But I hope that there's some messages in here that really help the collective and you in any moment that you might need it. So thanks again, ladies. I know this was incredibly helpful for myself, and sending everybody out there lots and lots of love, truthfully, from the bottom of our hearts. And that if there is something that is you'd like more clarity on, or you would like us to touch on, please put it in the comments and generate a beautiful conversation and allow the Spirit Coffee Talk community to really come together and help each other during this time. So, sending lots of love to everybody out there. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share this conversation with somebody who you think might really benefit from it. So, thanks again, everybody, and have a wonderful week.